do come, Paul, and I won't take any more of your time. Everyone will learn about all that you have to share as you go, I think, who you are, what you do. So over to you.
Thank you very much. What an invite, and thanks very much for seeing me. Hard act to follow. What a great speaker Martin was, and what a passion he's got for Oxford and Oxfordshire. So if I was you and I was churches in Oxford, I'd be thinking, wow, that's an open invite from the chief exec saying, come and help me. I've got big problems. I need help. And they don't often say things like that, chief execs of councils. So it is a great opportunity. And hopefully what I bring from Southampton, a lowly city now, not even with a Premier League team anymore, a lowly city. From our lowly city is to talk about how we federated, that was the word he used today, how we federated our churches to be able to better interact with our local authority, and not just with local authority, but with police and other statutory agencies like health as well. And hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully nothing I say is arrogant. All of this is born out of us as church people trying to do the things that God has given us to do and to serve that vision that we have. So I say everything humbly, although there's some great things, so bear with me if I come across in any way proud or arrogant about our city. But there are some good things. And one thing we've done is try to write up everything that we've been doing over the last 10 years as well. So I brought along some of our annual reports. So they're free to take. They cost about £4 to print, but you're free to take some. And they're outside, so if you'd like to do it. And I think one thing I've learned the last 10 years is I'm a good activist. So I get things done over time. And so if I'm asked to do something, I will just get on and do with it. But what I don't do, hardly ever, is write up what I've done. Anyone else like that in the room? And so it's okay if everyone stays in the room. So if the people here are in the room 5 years' time or 10 years' time, it doesn't matter, because you all know, oh yeah, we did this together. But what I've learned over these 10 years is there's this massive turnover in staff with city council, with health and police inspectors. And so you can have a great relationship with the head of children's services. You can do some great work with them, but 6 months later, they're on to another job. In fact, there was another report I wrote. That we wrote from Love Southampton called a food report, which is out there as well. And so we had an independent researcher come in to interview people that were being served at the pantries, talking to lead people in the city council. And I said to this researcher, when you do the report, do me a favour, don't put anyone's names in. Just put their titles in, say head of stronger communities or head of housing, whatever it is, and do that, and don't put any names in there at all. Because if one person moves on, it dates the whole report. And they may leave under a cloud as well, not that those people did, but if they do, it taints the whole report. Because it's like, oh, that person, I can't believe they've named that person. And so we did this, and guess what? By the time the report was done, every single person that we interviewed was gone. All of them. So these are reports, and that's what he asked for as well, Martin, wasn't it? Give me case studies, write down the things you've done, give them to me. And so I've got these printed just this week, and so on my list this week, I'll be seeing the Chief Exec of Southampton and the Director of Public Health. I'll be saying, oh, here's what we've done. And I know that they'll look through it, and they'll be pleased, because their photo's in there as well. And I'll see the Bishop of Southampton and her photos in here. And so you've got to, it's just being clever about some of that stuff. So let me get on. I've written far too many slides. So if I skip past them, bearing in mind you've got a master at work that does school assemblies. Do any of you do school assemblies? You're given 20 minutes, and then the head of year tells the year group off for 16 minutes, and you've got 4 minutes left to do your assembly. So that's my life. But I think when we look at this unity work and working with that local authority, this is the Simon Sinek thing that you've probably seen before. But I think it's important for us to ask ourselves, why are we doing what we're doing? And we've already heard examples today. It's because of stories like the Good Samaritan, that you help the person in need. It's the basics of Jesus' mission, is that the one person is vitally important. But if we don't have our why sorted out, we get very confused about why we're doing it. And people ask us, aren't we just doing what should be done by the local authority for cheap? That's the sort of thing that's said. And so you've got to be very clear on why you're doing what you're doing, what your purpose is, then how you're going to do it, and then what you're going to deliver. And I think the reports then help us to say, well, what have we delivered as a result of our unity? And for you together as churches, is saying what are our actual outcomes, us working together? What are the outcomes from today? So Steve's already given some really impressive statistics from the initiatives that happened last year. But what would it mean? And that's what Martin was saying. I've got this problem with deprivation. What could the churches do to close that gap on the postcodes? And so if you took that as all your church and said, right, we will help with that thing, that point that he made, that one issue, and we'll focus on that. But it's then whether all the churches want to focus on that one thing or whether actually you're more concerned about something else. So we had a campaign 10 years ago, which was at the start of Love Southampton really, around foster carers. So the city had a shortage of foster carers. This story gets told quite a lot around the country, so bear with me if you've heard it before. I won't tell it very long. But we went to meet with the head of fostering, and they said to us, we're about 80 foster carers short. And actually, if we had those foster carers, it would save us the amount of money that we need, like the deficit. So could you help us find some of those? So we counted up that we had 40 churches, and we were talking with Krish Kandara at the time. And we thought, surely we could find one new foster family from each church. So there'd be 40 people. So we pledged to this Families for 40 idea. And so 2013, start of that, we pledged to that. And so it was an outcome. Do you see what I mean? This is what we're trying to do, 40 foster carers. There's one result that we're looking at. And we agreed all together as church leaders, because we were in the room together at the time, that this is what we would do. And then we set about doing it all together, and we did it and more. So we got up to something like 75 people that volunteered for fostering, which is how Home for Good accelerates so fast with all of that. But it was because we had a clear goal. And one of the pleas, I think, from Martin and from today is to say, what are the shared outcomes that you could agree together that you would do? Because you're not all going to agree on your theology and your background and things, but if you've got a shared vision, shared purpose, shared outcomes, these are things that you can work on together. And that's where the manifesto at the end of the day, I guess, comes into that, Steve, as to how we're going to try and build things. So to do this, it's not dependent on our theology, ecclesiology or missiology, but it is based on us having a clear sense of direction. This is where we are going together. And we've agreed within Southampton, we're not always going to see eye to eye, but we will work hand in hand. So over a thing like foster carers, finding foster carers, we said we can all do this together. Yeah. Doesn't matter on our belief about baptism, women, Eucharist or whatever. The thing that we're trying to do, we can all do together under a shared vision. So we didn't have a basis of faith. We've had this base of love, the base of Love Southampton. And again, with that title, Love Southampton, it creates a little tension because then your team has got to get on with each other first and foremost. You can't call yourself Love Southampton if you're falling out with each other all the time. And sometimes, because you're trying to hit a hard target, it's stressful, do you know what I mean? And so people can start getting pushy or bolshy or moany or whingy. That was a nice word that was used today. And so at the basis of everything we do, our team has to have this sense of being the headship of Christ, prayerfulness, and then actually being caring and loving towards our team members. And that's not easily done when you're trying to go somewhere, is it? And you're trying to do something. So the pandemic is another time when we realized, the council said to us in the pandemic, so 2020, that first few days, I'd set aside myself a little writing target. So I picked up a writing project on that. I thought I could keep myself busy during the pandemic. I got this little project to do. So I picked up this contract. And then the council said, we're going to organise all the food for the city. So everyone who's self-isolating, vulnerable, clinically vulnerable, can't go out, we're going to make sure all the food goes out to them. So I said, And they said, come along Saturday morning. We've hired the Guildhall, the big Guildhall in Southampton. We've got security there to man all the food that's coming down from national government. Come and see it. So I was like, I'll go down. So me and my friend from Love Southampton went down on Saturday morning. And literally, this is true, something like 4 lasagnas and 3 packets of custard had arrived from the government. That was it. And there was a space the size of an auditorium. And the council leaders were embarrassed. They were looking down there. They're like, no, there's more food coming. And guess what? More food didn't come. And so it was Saturday we saw that. By the Tuesday, nothing happened. That's when my writing project went to the side a little bit. I was like, shall we take over this project for you and organise this? And they said, yes, please. So they shut down the Guildhall. All our churches were shut anyway. And so 2 of our big churches in the centre of town became food distribution centres by the end of the week. And we had food out to everyone by the next day, by the Saturday. And then we carried that on all through the pandemic, fed the whole city. Everyone needed volunteers that came in, people that were furloughed and all the rest. It was a massive achievement. The only thing that suffered, the only thing that suffered was my writing project, but I did get it done in the end. So that's another example, but of food being delivered, and again, just tracking all of that. But we could have been so busy in there and never ever wrote it up, and that's what we've done in the report outside there. So, but also it's based on us agreeing to unite together. So coming together very quickly in that time was the Anglicans and me and conservative churches, all sorts of people had to just say, we'll do that together. I won't linger on this, but our history of churches isn't great, which is what Martin was also saying. We've divided over everything over the course of history, haven't we? The most famous one, I think, was the couple of 100-year debate over when Easter should be. I don't know if you've ever thought about that. If you were living back in that time, and your predecessors already done it for 50 years and not come to a conclusion, and they're like, okay, he's died now, could you take over, please? And you go on your camel and you go off to Jerusalem or wherever, and all these people come together, right, let's agree the date of Easter, let's get this over and done with. No, we haven't done it this time. We'll see you in another year. And it went on, didn't it, for centuries. And then finally, as you all know, they did agree finally on when Easter should fall in the calendar. Do you know that? So everyone agreed, it was all done. So imagine going back on your camel, finally we've agreed. And then the next Easter, everyone's meeting on Easter Day, the same day, all over the world, until they realise they've agreed the same date on the calendar, but they're using two different calendars. The East and the West. And so now I'm actually organising, partly what I've done today, early this morning, I'm organising a Good Friday service for our whole city. And so I've emailed everyone, and then I met with the Greek Orthodox. I said, when's Good Friday? He said, well, the bad news is Good Friday doesn't coincide with the Western Church at all this century. It's never going to be on the same week. I was like, okay, we won't work with you then, because you can't really do it. So, no, I'm still talking to them. We'll come to some conclusion. So I'm being a bit facetious, but sometimes we can divide over so many things, but the reality of our situation is in there, and probably in the Protestant church, we've divided over everything, haven't we? And that's where Roger does such a great job. Roger, I'll give you a shout at the back there. Just uniting churches around common purpose, shared goals, and around prayer and things like that. So I won't linger on some of these things, but this is the leader of our church network called Ness Wilson. So I'm part of the Pioneer Network of Churches. I lead a church called City Life Church. Although when I say I lead a church, I'm one of the... Yeah, well, if I was to ask you what a church leader does, lead services, speak on a Sunday, I do virtually none of that. So I did actually speak this month for our church, but I very rarely speak these days in this thing. You probably can tell already. I don't organise any services, so none of my day-to-day job is really around Sunday. The decision that I've made and others in the city have made is I'm not pastoring a church in my role, I'm pastoring a city. And it's a big shift in thinking, and so I'm not thinking I'm responsible for 150 people, whatever it is, but I'm responsible for 256,000 people that live in Southampton. That's the responsibility that I feel, and that I feel called to, and I'm happy to have that call. But there's others in the city that will say, well, I'll look after my parish. Others say, I'll look after my church, and there are some that will say, I'll look after the city. And so when a situation arrives in the city, like the rough sleeping situation, or the Ukrainians arriving, or Afghans arriving in the city, I feel it's my responsibility as a pastor, a father in the city, to be involved in those. So I have been involved as much as if it was my own children when they've arrived there, because that's what I feel is me. So Ness said that the church doesn't have a mission. The mission of God has a church. And so part of our role as church, it's not an end, is it? It's an end to a means, that the church exists to have a mission, to be able to connect with our communities, to be able to reach out to our communities and make a difference within there. It's a big shift, isn't it? And so if we sense that God is at work, which is what Martin, I think, was saying as well, without using the word God, that if God is at work in all these global things and extra local things, then what is our part to play in that mission? So the way we've united ourselves, I'll go back to, so there are three very simple things. So it's quite low level entry to come into Love Southampton. If you were to arrive in the city, there's Once a month we pray together in the city, so there's a prayerfulness about that. The Love Southampton is more the activist, practical stuff, so that will include refugees, rough sleeping. It was around the food poverty side of things. When we first started, the big cut was to children's services. So 10 years ago, there was a huge cut to children's services. The city council had 80 youth workers at one point. And then, as we were talking about today, those salami slices happened, down to just a team of 5 or 6 youth workers. Then they were given their cards in 2013. But there were still lots of youth centres around. So in 2013, Love Southampton was birthed, talking about foster care, talking about children's services, but also around these youth centres, saying maybe we could help, maybe we could reopen some of those places with volunteers. And the team, if you imagine you're on that youth team, they said, yeah, please do, because I don't think anyone's going to do it. Here's the keys to the centre, and I'll be gone in 2 weeks. So that's what happened. We got loads of keys given to us, and over the next 2 years, we got the leases sorted out, but we had the keys for a little while before that. But before we took over, talk about these salami slices, one of those places called Monty's in Southampton, it was opened by the council just 1 hour a week. So that was the full youth service to that part of town. And then the church has taken it over, the nearby church. So I took the keys off the guy, gave it to one of the local churches. They organised it. They raised enough money to refurbish the whole place from Veolia, who do all the tips and dumps and everything. So they gave £30,000 to redo this place. And then it's now open. If you go there, it's open all day, every day. It sees people in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. It's got a recycling bike centre. It's well known in the city, and we're just looking to take over another one. But it's a massive transformation, and it spells out what could happen once these salami slices happen. And as you said, once you get down to a minimal amount of service, is there something else you could do? And it's through churches that we can actually conjure up the ability, and with our charity numbers, to raise the money to be able to rejuvenate some of these things. So those practical things are with Love Southampton. And then the thing we started doing recently, if you know my friend Billy Kennedy down in Southampton, which I'm sure some of you do, he's helped organise just monthly lunches. So it's nothing new about this, nothing radical about this, but once a month, leaders are invited to get together. So it's 3 times, Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, where people could get together, just eat together. We have been following a little curriculum of teaching, but we've agreed from next year we're just going to talk about how each of us is doing, us and our souls, and how our lives are going. So it's very easy, accessible, and one church just provides lunch for that. But that's our unity, and it means that that we are unified. There's relationships there, but there's also action, and there's also prayer. So 3 things that are key: fellowship, prayer, and action. See, I know my slides. Let me just click. Oh, have I turned it off? Does it click down? Oh, it's there. So that's what I like really about our relationship. And I'm picking up from today as well, that there's good relationships here. It's practical and it's prayerful. People are looking out for each other. This is a little Bible verse. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Keep going, Dan.
Sorry, I'm messing around with stuff.
Oh, it's yours. Oh, okay. That's right. And this is our key verse that we just picked up, because I think we're doing the annual report. So I think one of the reasons why we don't tell the story is because we feel we shouldn't say, oh, I've done this, I've done that, and in a sense be overly proud about what we've done, or be boastful. We don't want to be boastful, do we? Which is how I start today's talk. And so there is that fear that we would be boastful. But unless you're presenting, this is what we've done, this is how many volunteers we've got, this is how many hours service we've done, this is how many meals we've provided, no one knows what the church is doing. No one knows how to connect. And the main purpose of this is not to glorify ourselves, is it? It's to glorify our Father in heaven. There's a lot of good work that's going on, and God gets no glory for it because we don't tell the story in a public space. And so it helps us to be able to tell those stories better and to do it well, and not to feel embarrassed about that, which I think probably is the main reason why we don't publish a lot of our figures. I still find it a little bit irksome when some churches say, I've just given £10,000 this year. I'm like, I'm sure that Jesus had something to say about that. But so I don't do that. But I do just try and report what we've done. Can we keep going down? This is our catchphrase in Southampton, is through the church for the city, is our strapline. We spent a good few weeks working on that, so be impressed with how impressive that is. Yeah, No, it could have been worse, 200 years. You wouldn't believe how long that took. And I think, actually, when you talk about it, everyone in the room thinks it's their idea. I don't know how that happened. Like, I came up with that. And, no, I did. And so there we go. And then the there is hope thing is something that the local authority love. Because I don't know about you, but in the pandemic, I was in calls. Sometimes I was just with the council. Sometimes I was with church people. And when I was on the calls with council-type folk, it just got so depressing. It's just like, oh man, these guys are really up against it, and they've just lost that sense of hope in the environment they're in. Then you go on a call with different church networks, you're like, there's so much hope in this group. And I don't think we realise how much hope is birthed in us through, as you said, the story of the resurrection. Things can be absolutely in the tomb, but we believe in the resurrection, that Friday's good because Sunday's coming. And so that's our catchphrase, there is hope, which has resonated well with people. And then these are the three things we've been trying to do. So remember, we've got the why, how, what. So one thing is, if you call yourself a network, you've got to be a network. You've got to actually connect. So Steve's got a database of you all somewhere. So there is a network here in Southampton. But it takes some doing. It takes a bit of work to coordinate pastors, believe it or not. To get all the sheep together is quite a task. And so the networking isn't easy, and because leaders change and they don't hand over generally very well, do they? One church leader to the next. They'll hand over like the service sheets, but they won't necessarily think about the relationships that they have in the city. So all of that can get lost. Part of my role now, an informal role, is that when a new leader comes into the city, I'll just do an induction for them. I'll go and see them, and I'll sit down with them. I'll say, this is how we organise ourselves around unity, and chat through with them over coffee. And then invite them, and sometimes they'll turn up to stuff and sometimes they won't. But at least I've shared it, and you can't blame them for not. And then I've invited them to join any admin that we've got. So just some practical stuff, but it takes someone's time to do it. The second is the storytelling I've already talked to you about. But I was, over a 6-month period from October through to March, we wrote 27 different stories up of things the churches were doing. So they just came thick and fast. Pretty much every week we had a story about what someone was doing. And then just to labour on the point of food again. You know how it works. Everyone's got their own empire. I can't remember what Martin said, but they've got their own patch that they're doing. And when you start talking about doing something collegiate, everyone's like, no, we don't do it that way. And so what I said, what was helpful for my report is, what about if we knew how much food was going out in 1 week in the city, and we did a food snapshot? And in 1 week, we said however much food went out. So, can you guess what the response was to that? So we were like, well, we give out so many bags. Another person said, we help so many households. Another, we help so many people. And we're like, we've got so many pounds worth of food. I'm like, this is nonsense. I don't know if you ever did maths, but you remember my poor kids at school are struggling at the moment with GCSE maths. The simultaneous equations, the more variables they have, the more complex it becomes. I was like, this is like simultaneous equations. We've got 10 variables. Couldn't we just have one variable? And I was getting there with most people to agree this. But one person who was in charge of probably about 15,000 meals a year, he was like, no, we can't do it like that. Please help me. And so I then had to get the local authority to apply a bit of pressure, and we sat down together and eventually said, well, let's measure in 1 week how many meals go out. So if you've got a bag and you know that's 4 meals, helping a household, you know you're giving them 15 meals. Let's just measure how many meals go out in 1 week. And they said, yes. Then we agreed a date, and we got a date. And then through the week, everyone captured how many meals they gave out. It added up to 1 million meals a year. A year. So we published it on our website. Within a couple of days, ITV, BBC, what's this 1 million meals? Because it's like a headline, isn't it? It's a big figure. And so the ITV, they actually went to the place that didn't want to do the snapshot. So 2nd of January, I think it was, I got a call from ITV, can we come and film on Monday? So whatever it was, like the 4th of January. I was like, yeah, sure, this is a great time to organise things, 4th of January. So they did, they went there 4th of January and they filmed this year. And they filmed it. And the guys say it was the best ever promotional thing they've had for their work. Like, it was a great video. They now use it in all their training things for volunteers. This is what we do. Because they'd spent a whole day there understanding the community pantry, you know, that system, and what it was all about, and they explained it. But how much work did it take? In the back, honestly, I was pulling the little hair that I had left out. to just get to that point of having one variable. Once you've got one variable, you've then got a great thing. And once you've got a million meals, you can say, that's this many households, this many bags. That's the way simultaneous integration works. So you can flick it. So there's that. And then finally, you've probably you've caught on already that there's a catalyst to what we do. You know, once we say we're going to go somewhere, that we help mobilize people towards that goal. Next slide, please, Dan. This is a little picture. I've enjoyed the images and the metaphors today. This is my one, which I share with the council quite often, is that the church isn't like a navy, because a navy has order. And a navy has a plan and a sense of authority and structure to it. And the church doesn't have those things, let's be honest. So if the naval commander says, right, today we're going to Argentina, everyone goes to Argentina that day. There's no squabbling or quabbling. If you say, that's the way it happens. Whereas the church is more like a flotilla. So because it's true, isn't it? Every church leader is in charge of their boat, their church, aren't they? They're on the trusteeship or the leadership team. They decide where the money gets spent and how the building gets used, and they're in charge. And then I can go to another church and say, hey, why don't we do this? But I can't tell them what to do. I can ask, but that's all I can do. So 2020, January 20, we opened up a winter bed. So we hadn't run one for quite a few years in Southampton. So the idea is simple. You know the thing. So each night of the week, 7 nights of the week, a different church opens up with their winter beds, and then we just rotate round 7 churches. So it's not a big thing. So January 19, we started to share this idea with churches. And then by October 19, we had 3 churches signed up. Pretty disastrous. So but we're aiming to start in the winter, obviously. So we then gathered everyone together again for prayer meeting. We'd start together. By December, mid-December, we're aiming to open in January. We had 6 churches together. We're still lacking 1. And they were struggling with their insurance company, organising things. So I said, look, do you mind if I talk to my insurance? I talk to your insurance company? Sure, go ahead. So I rang the insurance company on behalf of the church, their church, and said, do you have churches helping people that are homeless that you insure? Yes. This is what this church wants to do. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, thanks very much. Honestly, that was the conversation. And so after that call, which was about December the 20th, we had that all agreed. And then in January, we opened up our winter beds. But I worked out halfway through the year that the reason why they didn't want to open up wasn't because they didn't have the money or the church or the rules. They were worried. They were fearful about their church being ruined or someone being harmed or something happening because of the people that we were dealing with. And once I started talking to them about why they were fearful about that and what we were doing to allay their fears and the risk assessment, that swung most people around. It came together. But I can't tell people what to do. And but what we have done is organise ourselves so the flotilla has a sense. What you can do with a flotilla is say, right, we're headed to Dunkirk, famous example, and you all head towards Dunkirk. You're in charge of your ship, but you're heading the same way. Some people might still go to Plymouth, some might still go to Hastings, but who cares? The majority of you are heading to where you agreed. And so that's pretty much been our ethos. Just quickly, the last 10 years, thanks, Dan. We opened some new schools. So it's partly how we got into conversation with the Children's Services, is that we access money from national government to bring down money to build 2 brand new schools. So it's about £40 million worth of schools that we built coming in here. And then we met with them about mitigating the cuts. I've already talked about that. Then 2013, we did a lot of work with that Children's Services manager to help them through a very difficult budget year for them. But they moved on. So all of that story, the head of fostering moved on. All of that story locally in Southampton, though it was being told at New Wine and other places, no one remembered it in Southampton, so it got lost. We launched Safe Families back in 2016. I think that's the right date. I think it might be earlier. But that's another interesting story, because a new head of Children's Services that came in, myself and a friend, we went to talk about Safe Families to the head of Children's Services. And she threw us out. She said, literally, I don't want anything to do with church. While I'm in charge here, I want nothing to do with you. So she threw us out. And my friend and I were walking back home, like tail between our legs. And my friend said, we should write a letter of complaint. I said, look, And then he'll tell you the same story. I said, if she's that rude to us and we're offering to help us, she won't be here for long. She'll be gone. Mark my words, I said. And then literally, I don't know if it was a prophetic decree I made, but a week later, front page of the paper, head of children's services leaves in mysterious circumstances. I was like, Dave! Look what happened. And then there's a couple of times in the year when the church and the state come together. We saw it at the coronation, didn't we? That within our country, there's these times when the church and state have these civic ceremonies. So we have like a civic ceremony in Southampton. But Remembrance is one of those times when literally the bishop marches alongside or in front of the chief executive council, and they spend a bit of time together there every year in a strange ceremony that we've set up in England. So this Remembrance service, the Bishop of Southampton, who's now the Bishop of Portsmouth, said to the chief exec, "Oh, I hear your team were rude to my friends about Safe Families, but I really want to bring Safe Families in to the city." And within a month, Safe Families was launched off the back of the Remembrance service. So there are these little times where we do that. Then off the back of this, we've done this Faith Covenant launch. So you can look this up, but there's an all-party parliamentary group that looks at faith and society, and they've created this covenant about how local authorities and churches, faith groups can work together. So we signed this formally in 2017 and opened another school. But this faith covenant says the head of children's services can't just throw you out because they don't like faith. It's written into this covenant. And so it's signed at a higher level by the council leader, and it's signed by the bishop and church leaders. And we've just re-signed it in the last month. Then we've done work around homelessness and so on. Next slide down, please. I did write my resources, you'll be pleased to hear, in 2020. So I wrote some educational resources around the city. A bit like Martin was saying about the story of Oxford. The story of Southampton isn't very well told, but with our City of Culture bid that we didn't quite win, Bradford beat us. But there was a lot of time spent about what is Southampton, who is Southampton, what is our story, and that was part of what I wrote during there in the 2020. And then our winter beds has carried on. Then in here, if you're interested in that, just this October, we led a cost of living summit. So it's partly how I got to meet Steve, I think, because word of this summit got together quite well. I think with the cost of living, everyone individually and then organisation was just very concerned about their budgets, weren't they? But I was looking at it and thinking, who's thinking about the whole city and like the budget of everyone in the city? And so I called this cost of living summit together and invited everyone in. And it's sort of thing, because it was in the news every day, if you were a leader in the city, you couldn't not turn up to it, could you? You had to be there. So the leader of the council was there, we had the universities there, citizens' advice, everyone. And then we arranged a program where people spoke in the morning and then created action groups in the afternoon. So things like the warm welcome rooms. Off the back of this summit, we launched 60 or 70 warm spaces off the back of that thing, and we launched the food audit. But that's what we've built up over these 10 years through delivering things, is the ability to call people together around things like rough sleeping, the cost of living, around different issues, and to look at how we can have shared outcomes, whether we're people of faith or not. But they do actually trust us as a church to do it. In many ways, we're not a competitor. We've got our own resources. We're not always looking to take off people. We have got people and money to give. And so most of these summits and forums that we've led, we've paid for from our church, from church funds or money we've raised from churches, everything we've done through there. Next slide, please, Dan. I've got a few comments from, you can scroll through those just while I'm speaking, a few comments from like the chief exec and from the leader of the council, just about what they think about Love Southampton. But the thing we've created really, because Love Southampton isn't its own charity, we don't have a bank account, but it's a network that has formed a brand effectively that is this voice, catalyst, and network. Because before, if the council wanted to speak to someone from the church, they'd either find the bishop or a street pastor, or they'd go to a food bank manager, and they're not going to be a help with youth services or suicide prevention. It's not what they're about. And so Love Southampton's created this network where there is one point of contact for local authorities to come to about social issues, and they know that we would listen to them and they'll listen to us. And so every twice a year maybe, we meet with the chief exec and the council leader. We go and meet with them. talk to them about their issues around the budget and things like that, and look at what we're doing. And we'll tell them about any sort of shape shifting that's happening around the city as well. I'm almost out of time, so I've got 100 more slides. We can probably send them around, but I've also got these reports with things in. Hopefully I've given a bit of texture to it all in the midst of it, of what we've done. What we have created, like we've never got unity that is perfected because we all disagree over different things, but we have created this sense of parenting our city, fathering our city, mothering our city, which is at the core of who we are as churches, and the things that we deliver make a real difference. So you start to see 18,000 people that are helped by the church through food programs. We can document that. We start to see that we help bring the rough sleeper numbers down by 2/3 through the conference that we ran. Through the cost of living summit, we delivered this and this. So you get outcomes through there. But it all comes at somebody's cost. And the last little story I was going to tell, it's an old sermon illustration. So if you haven't written your talk for Sunday, you can use this one. But you know the old story about an advert comes past a farm of the Great British Breakfast. So we don't have coffee and croissant, we have bacon and eggs, don't we, in Britain? Thanks, very good. And the pig and the hen, they see this advert for the Great British Breakfast, and the chicken says to the pig, "Oh look, we're famous. we're the Great British Breakfast." And the pig says to the chicken, "You know what's coming. Well, it's okay for you. You only have to make a contribution. For me, as a sacrifice. It's going to cost me my life." And the truth around the unity stuff is, and it's a hard look at ourselves and our own churches, is are we going to make a gift towards that? Like turn up to the odd thing, or, give a few pounds here and there, like a gift that doesn't, or are we going to make a sacrifice? And I think for us, it's been a sacrifice for people in Los Angeles, because we're giving not just like £50, we're giving £10,000 or those sums of money to make the centre of it happen. But it's because we believe in the core of that mission, the core of helping the one person, and we believe in the voice, the catalyst, and the network. Not everyone's got £10,000 to give, but you might have time or things. But will we just give an offering to this, or will we sacrificially give into it? Poor pig. And that was my final thing, really, a personal reflection. When it comes to unity, what am I going to give from my church? Am I going to give the bare minimum, a small commitment, a commitment when it suits me, or am I going to make it something that I will sacrificially make sure I'll be part of? And I'm obviously speaking again to the choir, because you're here on a hot Saturday, which we don't have many of in England, and you've given your time to be a part of it. So I can see your people are sacrificed. But my prayer is that your unity grows, strengthened by the Spirit, and it makes a real impact in this city and county. Thanks very much.
Well, I found that inspiring and helpful. I should say, Roger, who got a name check earlier, you just wave, Roger. Roger Sutton is with us today, leads the Gather movement across the UK, which connects together people like Paul and those of us involved in trying to move things forward in the city of Oxford. There are people in towns and cities across the UK. Do you want to actually, Roger, you just want to come and say hi? Yeah, that would be useful. Introduce yourself. You know what to say.
Hi, I'm Roger. I'm from Manchester. The other side to City, I'm afraid, but hopefully they'll lose tonight. We connect. So I bring you greetings from Lincoln, which is doing exactly what you're doing. I bring you greetings from Sunderland, and I can bring you greetings from Teesside, where they had a prayer meeting just before Christmas. 900 people turned up to pray for the city, Teesside, Middlesbrough. I'll bring you greetings from Bath and Bristol, and 28 of the 32 London boroughs now working together as one church, one gospel, one city. And I could go on, 150 different places in the UK, but I bring you greetings from Together for Berlin. They're together in Berlin. You didn't know that, but they're also together in Frankfurt and in Hamburg and Nuremberg and in Oslo and in Netherlands, and I bring you greetings from India. I bring you greetings from Mumbai, where 1,200 churches work together across a city of between 22 and 27 million. They don't know how many people live in Mumbai, but the church works together as one group. That's the Spirit of God, brothers and sisters. They also work with 50 other cities. They have a plan now for another 100 cities in the next 3 years, and don't bet against the Indians doing that.
Amen.
And I can take you right across Africa. In the autumn, I'll be in Japan, where churches are starting to work together, very small, but they're starting to work together in Fiji and in New Zealand and in Australia and America and South America and Canada. This is a move of the Holy Spirit. No one person has done this, no one book. It's just a fashionable thing. It's been going on for 30, 40 years, pretty much under the radar. And God now is lifting the sheet upon it that was over it and, in a sense, unveiling it to say, this is what I've been doing. I think he's reforming the church. Yes. I think it's a fundamental reformation, and it's towards the city and towards the town to which you've been called. So it's fantastic to hear again up-to-date stuff on Southampton. I could have brought you loads of people here, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is Oxford and what God is doing amongst you and what he has the potential to do. So it's lovely to be here.
Great, thank you. Yes, perfect, thank you. So the question of how churches in a city become something of a flotilla is something that has exercised me for a while. I just take a step back. Love Oxford was, and we've got the phrase renew Oxford here, but beneath that, and more significant than that, is another phrase, which is love Oxford. In 2007, it was actually Charlie Cleverley, who was then rector at St Aldate's, said, what if churches across the city were invited to cancel their own Sunday morning service and we all met together? And we could have a visible demonstration of our unity, we could praise God together, we could pray together, we could see one another, and we did that. Who was there? Who's been around that long? Yeah, that's not surprising to me that people that were there then are here now, because something happened. And I can't remember if it was the first year or the second year, but we sang a song that had been actually proclaimed, first of all, over a city in Thailand. Greater things are yet to come. Greater things are still to be done in this city, and we believed it. And over a number of years, we continued with those gatherings, and as we did so, a question began to bubble up more and more insistently, which is, as we call this event Love Oxford, and as we call ourselves as a network that came together Love Oxford, how can we do our best job of loving Oxford? What does that look like? And it happens in myriad different ways all over the place. How and to what extent might it happen together? And certainly I was one of those that would turn up to the pastors' meetings where these questions were asked and bang the drum, and wasn't alone in saying this, but like, how and when are we going to do more together than simply have this visible demonstration of unity? And at a certain point, some of the other pastors said to me, well, can you stop just complaining and explore it? And thankfully, the church that I lead, which is Oxford Community Church, said, the rest of our team said to me, look, take a day a week to go and learn how this might be done. And over the last few years, that's what I've done. I've had lots and lots of conversations. I've learned a huge amount. And I still don't know quite how you pull a flotilla together. But I've been encouraged in many of those conversations to discover, when Paul was saying about the importance of shared theology, that actually there's a great foundation of shared theology, common understanding, which we can just articulate and say, look, here's where we stand. Not a doctrinal basis that sticks a boundary around things so much as just a statement of fact that the churches that are in Love Oxford are together for certain things. And so I've written that up, and you can see that in just a minute. I've also been encouraged with what Paul's also saying about having a shared purpose. Like, what are we What are we for together? And of course that needs to take some definite, some specific form. We're together, you know, if it is going to Dunkirk, like Dunkirk needs naming. And so I've taken time recently just to write up what I think are things that have just come up again and again and again and again in the many conversations that I've had. So I think these are some things that we're all committed to and that are worth naming. So I've written that up. This is very grandly named Love Oxford Manifesto for the City of Oxford. And in here there's a bit of blurb, picture of our first meeting of Love Oxford 16 years ago, and a list of 6 suggested commitments that individuals can make that would be for the greater good of the city, and 6 suggested commitments that we might make more corporately, whether as local churches or if you're here representing a Christian organisation of some other kind, commitments that could be made. It says really clearly on all of these pages, draft, because I have no authority. I mean, I resonate a lot with what Paul was saying. But I've tried to articulate what I've heard again and again. And before we finish the day, there's going to be, in that last session of the day, there's going to be time to talk with one another, and out of that to gather up all of your thoughts about these things, whether we quite see eye to eye on everything. I guess we might uncover a bit of that difference around things. But actually, I'm looking for these to. This is not a draft of the kind that I'm precious about. You know, please don't criticise it. It's like the more diverse voices are spoken into these things, the stronger and better they'll be. And if after having lots of input, the answer is it can only be half the length, because that's the volume of what we've got that we can really agree on. Well, let's agree on what we can. Let's chart the direction that we can together. I'm aware, looking around the room, there's probably amongst all of us 6 or 8 pastors of churches. I did think when Paul was saying, you know, pastors can go back to their churches and say what happens, I thought, well, that's true in some. In others, it's even more complicated. There are committees and meetings and things to work through. But this isn't a room today where we're going to get a sort of a yes and amen from churches. That's not who we are gathered today. But what we can do together is have a shaping influence on the kinds of commitments that are invited, and then it will be another task to work out how different churches and other Christian organisations are engaged with that. And that's a process that will take some time. And I'm really not trying to nail it all down and make everything tidy, but just trying to say kind of like, why don't we go over there? And it's not me saying that, it's saying I think it's in our hearts together that we go over there. If we can articulate that, it will bring strength to us and will be another significant step forward on. And when the question is asked, how can we love Oxford better, we'll actually have an answer, or a little pile of answers, which will animate and guide us and actually cause us to be further united and far more synergy to emerge in time. So I've got a pile of these things. We'll put them by the door. I just didn't want to hand them out at the end of the day, because some of you will want to have read and digested a little bit before being asked to what you think. So I thought we'll hand them out just before lunch, and then anyone that wants to read it, you'll probably want to talk to each other rather than read it. But anyway, it's at least available at an earlier opportunity. Just before breaking for lunch, I want to prompt you to ask yourself 2 questions. From all that you've heard, call to mind one thing for which you're thankful. There's more than one, but call to mind one thing for which you're thankful. And as you hold that in mind, I just want to lead a moment of prayer. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that you are gloriously abundant and generous. Thank you for the many things that we've heard today. I thank you for just know there'll be 50 more different things called to mind in this moment. We thank you for all of them. We recognise you as the giver of all good gifts. And I want to pray for anyone here who's struggling to hold on to the kind of optimism that even Martin was talking about. I pray that you'd refresh in us that joyful gratitude, the knowledge of your goodness. I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. And secondly, is there one thing from this morning that you have felt inspired to change? Call that to mind. One thing from this morning that you felt inspired to change. I invite you to take that into your conversation over lunch. Do say hi to people you don't already know. Seminars will start at 1:30.